When I was a kid, I used to dream what it would be like to live somewhere far away from Hell's Kitchen. But I realized the city was a part of me. It was in my blood. And I would do anything to make it a better place.
Good and evil. Sometimes the difference between the two is a sharp line. Sometimes it's a blur. Sometimes we have to do things outside of the law.
We're gonna make a difference. I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes, but we are.
You're blind, but you see so much.
I hear things.
You know what they call stuff like that? Gifts. I'm gonna train you. Use it.
There are other ways to see.
I don't see the city anymore. There's only dark corners.
I'll keep you safe, Karen. I have to be the man this city needs.
What are you gonna do?
Whatever it takes.
You and I have a lot in common. We're nothing alike.
Another man's evil does not make you good.
I respect your conviction. The lone man who thinks he can make a difference.
This darkness is the light.
I'm just trying to make my city a better place.
Maybe if he had an iron suit or a magic hammer, that would explain why you keep getting your asses handed to you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and joining me I have Steve Avona. Say hi, Steve.
Hey, Carlos.
Well, we're doing another one of our long-distance shows. This time around, like I mentioned on a couple of previous ones, this is a 1,000-mile distance show. Steve is calling me from New York, and I'm in Florida. Today, we are going to be discussing the recently wrapped-up superhero season and the new future of the superhero television seasons that are coming, because there's a ton of great stuff in the wings, and we just saw some trailers, and oh my God, do we have a lot of material to go over. Yep. Steve, why don't we start with something that it's been cooking for a while, and we finally got to see it, and I remember as we were watching it a little bit at a time for me, and I know you were doing a binge watching, It was just unbelievable. Let's talk a little bit about Daredevil.
Sure. Daredevil was the first of the Marvel Netflix shows.
Yes.
They had announced maybe about a year and a half ago that they were going to be doing, I guess, what you would call the grim and gritty superhero shows for Netflix. That would include Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and eventually they would all team up in a show called The Defenders. So Daredevil was the first, and I think we would both agree that they really hit a home run. We all remember the Ben Affleck movie. And if you want to go even farther back, we've covered this in previous shows. Rex Smith played Daredevil in the Trial of the Incredible Hulk. That was the first time that he was ever shown in live action. But and actually the costume in the Netflix Daredevil resembled somewhat the Rex Smith costume from that Hulk movie.
Well, yeah, he goes through the progression of the costume in the show. I remember, and I mentioned it a few episodes ago also, when I went to the last New York Comic Con, they had a whole panel previewing the show where they showed us a couple of clips. And it was one of those, and it's amazing because it kind of came true. It was one of those Walking Dead moments to me, because I remember a number of years ago, we attended the panel that was previewing The Walking Dead, and they showed us some clips, and we were freaking out. And that made me a Walking Dead fan.
Right.
And now, last year, like I said, I saw those clips for Daredevil, and then they had the panel with the actual stars. And it was like, oh my God, could this be as dark as it looks like it's going to be? And that's exactly what we got. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it was a really faithful adaptation of the comic, and especially certain storylines that were done in the 80s by Frank Miller, who everybody knows, co-directed and wrote Sin City, and is a very famous comic book writer who not
Big
only
Batman
did it,
guy,
he did Batman, and his run on Daredevil is generally considered the best. He redefined the character, and his run on it is really kind of an epic story.
Yeah.
So the show brought in elements, many elements from his run. And, it's hard for me to contain my enthusiasm because I'm not a huge Daredevil fan in terms of the comics. I've read it on and off, for many years. Of course, with sort of paying special attention whenever Frank Miller was on the book. But, this show, and just sort of to make a larger point here, we'll talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. later on and, how good or how bad it is. But this was proof that Marvel could really nail the whole TV thing because it really, DC has really been kicking the crap out of them when it comes to TV. And this was kind of like, well, how's it going to be? But I think using Netflix and, not being on network television and having sort of the ability to go really dark, really gritty, really
have more
R-rated.
freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just made it that much more intense and the stakes that much higher. You really felt like shit was really on the line here. And the violence was just unbelievable for a comic book show.
One of the things that I kept mentioning when I talked to people about it is that if this show had absolutely nothing to do with a superhero, if this was a cop story or a newspaper editor story, it would be an awesome show anyway.
Yeah.
The superhero aspect, it's almost like the cherry on top of this show because it is such a dark, gritty show. And obviously, we've had many conversations in the past. I'm the guy that gravitates towards that, when it comes to that sort of thing with superhero stories. And it's like, what else can they give me on the show that I want? There's just nothing else they can give me.
No, I mean, it was really sort of like a perfect 10, this show. And it has, to your point, we have friends of ours who wouldn't touch anything superhero related with a 10-foot pole who are watching this show and who kind of got sucked in by all the good press it got and are kind of like, well, it's really good. I can't complain. I can't say, oh, superheroes, whatever. But, I mean, we're dealing with a character who, yes, he has powers of, he's got that whole, radar sense and whatever, but, he's sort of in the vein of Batman. And I don't know if I would call him Marvel's answer to Batman, but he's got the whole, avenge the dead parent thing going on and saving my city or saving part of my city and whatever. But it really just knocks it out of the park. Every supporting character that they've brought in, who, most of whom come from the comic, were perfectly cast, perfectly just nailed. And, I think we just have to give special mention to Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, better known as the Kingpin. He was incredible.
Again, during the New York Comic Con, when they had the panel and he was there talking about it, you could tell that everybody around him was basically kissing his feet because the guy, he's a monster. He's an acting monster. In terms of what he does with a character, I think it's the equivalent of what in the 70s and 80s Pacino or De Niro would do with a character. They would completely tear a character apart and eat it. And that's what this guy does. He just eats a character and spits it out for you. It's amazing.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal actor who takes every role that he does very, very seriously. He's very intense. And he, like De Niro, like Pacino, he sort of inhabits the role completely.
Yeah.
And what I like, too, is, and I don't want to insult Michael Clark Duncan, who did a nice job in the movie, but I think they cast Michael Clark Duncan because he was a huge man and he was physically imposing like the Kingpin. But D'Onofrio was the character. I mean, just completely inhabited the character. Yeah, shave his head bald. There he is. He's the Kingpin. He didn't have to be 7'5" and monstrous. He just had to be that guy. He had to be Wilson Fisk. And I mean, everything from the relationship with Vanessa to his childhood his relationship with his sort of number one guy, all that stuff.
I love his social awkwardness and all
Yes.
those little ticks that he has that it's like he's a bomb ready to go off
Right.
or a little baby. He's both those things, and it's amazing how he does that.
Mm-hmm. No,
Is that
absolutely.
something that was in the character, or this is something he's bringing himself?
Well, I think they enhanced that aspect for the show. I think what really sort of impressed me was the relationship with Vanessa and how much he loved her, how intensely he loved her. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I think that the social awkwardness is a little bit more a convention of the show than it was of the comic. Because in the comic, he was very smug and sort of supremely confident and,
Well, maybe that's what he's becoming.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay when the shows take some liberties with the characters as long as it's not ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, especially with Fisk, I think it's adding dimension to a character that, I also may be forgetting because don't forget, I mean, I've been reading comics for almost 40 years and I don't remember every aspect of every story. And I'm not sure if the story about, his father and killing his father and everything like that is out of the comic, but it's okay. I mean, everything that they did worked, and one surprise for me. And again, it's good because it elevates the stakes of the show and the reality of the show. And the fact that they killed Ben Urich was kind of a shocker to me because he never died in the comic. So to sort of...
This is the newspaper guy, right?
The newspaper man, yeah. I was a little shocked that they did that. But again, you want to make these shows as realistic as possible. And yeah, people die, when the stakes are this high.
What about his henchman, the lead henchman for most of the show that gets shot? Is he also from the comic?
Yeah, no, I think he's sort of an amalgam of characters from the comic. I don't remember him specifically. And I think that's what made him a little bit expendable. Also, too, other characters that they brought in that were from the comic that I was wondering, well, how is this going to happen to so-and-so? Because like Leland Owsley is a character called the Owl. He's another villain.
Yeah.
He's another crime boss. Now, it kind of, got the impression he killed him. But I see a way out of that. I see a way that that might, bring him, that they may find a way or figure a way, maybe that's in the cards, to show him becoming the Owl because he was sort of a rival of the Kingpins in the comic.
I see.
And a minute, and again, if you're a reader of the comic and they drop these names, when I heard Leland Owsley, I'm like, that's the Owl. Mm-hmm. So who knows? I mean, they're getting a second season.
Exactly.
Which I'm just so excited. They dropped so many Easter eggs, which was great. I mean, you saw, when they flash back to college and Foggy asks him about the girl from Greece, that's Elektra. There are just, I mean, that's just the sort of the one that stands out, but there were so many that you're saying to yourself, like the tailor, Melvin Potter.
Oh, yeah.
He's the gladiator. He's another villain. I mean, and they showed you, I mean, yes, he's sort of a badass guy.
You see some of the things he's building in the background.
Yeah, and he had those little buzzsaw things that they sort of did a quick cut to, and you saw them, and he wore those on his gloves. So again, if you read the comics, this stuff is like, gold.
There was a link I remember I sent you guys. There was somebody put together all the Easter eggs in one presentation, and it was like, wow, they go really, really deep in this thing. It's amazing how they're layering it.
Exactly. And, even somebody like me, I'm sure I missed a few, but I was just, let me just say this right off the top. It's a really good time to be a fan of this kind of stuff, because I never thought in my wildest dreams that we would be sitting here talking about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 shows, superhero shows, to say nothing of all the movies. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I was completely blown away. To me, I had the same feeling as I did with The Walking Dead. In other words, something that is completely fresh to me that I couldn't imagine they could have pulled it off. And speaking of Walking Dead, this show was so full of holy crap moments that, again, reminds me of Walking Dead, when you have those little cliffhangers, that you're like, how can they possibly show this? But I want to go through just maybe 3 or 4 of these scenes. The first most memorable scene I remember is the fight that he does in the hallway.
In the hallway.
It's a nonstop fight, and apparently no camera tricks. I thought it was full of camera tricks. There was
Really?
no camera tricks. It was a
my God.
one-shot take that kind of reminded you, if you guys remember Old Boy. The hammer fight. It was a nonstop ass-kicking scene that was just incredible.
It was, but what was more impressive than Old Boy, it was just sort of one kind of tracking shot of him going down the hallway, fighting off these guys. This went from room to room.
Yeah, and he gets knocked in at rooms and out of rooms, and the camera's just out there waiting for him.
Right, exactly. And I think that was episode 2.
Yeah, it was very early.
And I'm saying to myself, that's why I had to binge. I could not sit on this show. Every time I was like, do I have an hour? Do I have an hour? Do I have an hour? I can do this. I watched it in a weekend.
Then I have the other scene that I remember is the Russians in the prison, and they need to make a shiv. And hey, you got a dead guy with ribs?
Got to do what you got to do.
Start cracking some ribs. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Then you have the henchman getting killed. I'm like, what? This guy I thought was an important and very important character, and they just and the person that kills them is even more unbelievable, because it's one of these little cliches of movies of like, here, I'm going to give you the gun, but it's secretly unloaded. It's like, oh crap, he gave her a loaded gun. It's like, you moron.
Well, how about when Fisk killed the Russian guy?
Oh, the limo.
With the limo at the door?
Wow.
I mean,
and he was like the nicer of the two Russian guys.
Yes.
Tell me about Scott Glenn.
Scott Glenn, he plays Stick, who, again, is from Frank Miller's run. And, just to give you just a little background, Frank Miller, when he started writing and drawing the book, Daredevil had been around for about 20 years, and he was always B-list, bordering on C-list in terms of popularity with Marvel. Yes. But he always had his own book, and he was always kind of there. But what Miller did was really elevate this character. He brought in a lot of sort of elements of the ninja and, Eastern philosophy and all that kind of stuff. And he filled in Matt's background in a way that never had been filled in before. And one of them was the sort of apprenticeship that he had with this character, Stick, who was blind like Matt and was able to train him because he had the same sort of radar sense. So, and where Matt couldn't sort of focus and sort of get all that noise out of his head, Stick helped him do that and helped him, learn how to fight and all that other stuff. But what you saw in the show was really just scratching the surface of what Stick is all about. And they did allude to it a little in the episode, but that he really is connected to a much, much wider organization. And
he's reporting to somebody.
Yeah. And also there's, sort of a good guys and bad guys in that whole world. And Elektra is also a big part of it. Okay. So, hopefully, season 2 is going to really explore that stuff.
Now, as far as I can tell, the lead actor, his name is Charlie Cox, right?
Yeah.
He was in Boardwalk Empire. That's the only thing I can remember him from.
Me too. He's a British actor, like they all seem to be. And and yeah, besides Boardwalk, I honestly don't ever remember seeing him in anything.
He plays it very well. Again, it's just, I cannot praise this show enough, and I can't wait for the new season. And I only wish they would give us 22 episodes instead of just 13. But
I know.
Hey, if 13 keeps the show alive for a longer time, let's go with 13.
Yeah, I'll go with the whole cable model, quality over quantity.
Yes, exactly. What show you have next?
Well, I mean, if you want to stay in the Marvel world, I guess we can talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, that just wrapped up.
Which just wrapped up, and that's also connected with Agent Carter. I have to say, we're talking a show of that has struggled.
Yes.
We're talking about a show that has been criticized quite a bit. And I have to say that the first season was a little rough for me, and it was really kind of, I guess what you'd call a loyalty show.
Yes.
I felt like I was watching it because I sort of had to. But this season, I think, was a vast improvement.
Yeah, and there seemed to have been very slowly developing an arc. There's an arc to the show. There's obviously with the season finale, a very Whedon twists, all his tricks come up close to the end.
Yeah, and I think what's always going to be the problem with S.H.I.E.L.D. is that it's always going to be talking about the Avengers and talking about these other characters. And maybe once in a while you'll get Sam Jackson showing up. And maybe if you're really lucky, maybe you'll get a cameo from like a Jeremy Renner or somebody. That hasn't happened yet. But, you'll get Kobe Smulders who show up as Maria Hill.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get the big guns on the show. So it's operating sort of like it's leading into a movie and it's coming out of a movie. And it's sort of a lot of its plots hinge on the movies. And what really helped last year was they were sort of handcuffed up until Winter Soldier came out.
Yeah.
And then when Winter Soldier came out and blew the doors off the whole story, then they could sort of operate better, I guess, like things really were out in the open, and sort of I just felt like there was a great weight that was lifted off the show once Winter Soldier happened. And I really enjoyed this season. What I found interesting was that, again, as somebody who read the comics, I know that they're establishing in this season, they established the race known as the Inhumans. And that's Marvel, they don't have, obviously, we all know they don't have the rights to the X-Men and the mutants and all that stuff. So it looks to me like they're setting up the Inhumans as sort of the MCU version of the X-Men.
Yeah, they seem to be kind of laying the groundwork, I got the feeling. And if you think about it, it seems to be almost like the whole purpose of one of the main characters, Skye, in the show, to be this Inhuman type of person. I almost felt like, even in the manner, like you mentioned before, how they treated Winter Soldier, how they kind of prepped for it and then got out of it. I think they kind of shoehorned the whole Ultron thing way less than Winter Soldier. It's been kind of downplayed, I think, a little bit, because whatever it is, whatever the mythology they're setting up now with the Inhumans seems to be more important than anything else.
That's exactly right. And I agree with you 100%. I think that the plot of Winter Soldier was much more integral to S.H.I.E.L.D. And I think Ultron was much less so, that they just sort of needed to acknowledge it, that it happened, but that it really wasn't. I mean, aside from this whole Theta Protocol thing and the helicarrier and everything like that sort of figured into Ultron. But other than that, I think it's all about Inhumans. But what's interesting, and now let's just be honest here, as weak as however you want to characterize the show, if you want to criticize it, or if you even want to say it sucks, I don't think it sucks, but a lot of people do dislike it. It's never going to be canceled. It's a Disney ABC show that Marvel wants on the air to sort of bolster the mythology of the movies. So it's never going away. So what I find interesting, though, is the fact that they're setting up the mythology of the Inhumans, and we're not getting that movie until 2019. So they're really playing a long game here. I mean, I'm sure there's other plots that are coming, other story arcs that are going to come into play. But they really, I mean, we're in 2015 and we're talking about a movie that's 4 years away. And I'm just wondering if this will sort of be like an underlying arc that, we revisit, as opposed to some, like, I mean, it was front and center this season, but I'm wondering, like, over the years now, in the coming years, it'll sort of slowly come to, you know what I'm saying?
It should, because I don't think they ever planned this movie, this plot line, to kind of leap into the movie, to kind of dovetail into it. I think just by bringing it up now, because if you think about it, when most people, and again, if you're talking with comic book people, they know everything, so they know what these people are. But when they were announcing the future of Marvel, Phase 4, and that was one of the first things I said, is because I'm not a comic book person, and I have a feeling these movies are aimed not at the comic book people, they're aimed at everybody, because everybody is a bigger group than the comic book people. Most people are probably like, what is an Inhuman? I mean, I know what Hulk is, I know what Iron Man is, even Black Panther, you can kind of say, okay, I kind of, but Inhuman is such a foreign concept that maybe that was the way of giving people a little intro into that world.
Exactly. And I think, again, I think you hit the nail on the head. Wow, this is I agree with Carlos. I don't believe it. I mean,
hold on, let me get the tote board. Bing, bing.
But I mean, this is a perfect vehicle for people. Plenty of people watch this show, and, just anything, like we've had this discussion before. If it says Marvel, people will watch it. So yes, the Inhumans, no one knows who the hell they are. They don't have the name recognition of X-Men, and they're not nearly as popular. But I have a feeling, once, we saw what happened with Guardians, that it'll probably just be as huge a hit as anything else. But yes, this was a great way to lay the groundwork. And I think that the show, the characters on the show, Coulson and May and all, there are some I like and some I don't. But I really do think that it's kind of hitting its stride. And I'm happy to see, new characters come in like Bobby Morse, who is played by Adrian Pilecki, who's a character in the comic called Mockingbird. And they were originally going to spin her off into her own series, but they put the kibosh on that. So she's still going to be in the show, but not have her own show. And they renewed Agent Carter, which I thought was kind of a 50-50 thing.
Since we're on that topic, how do you feel about the season, the Agent Carter season? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? How do you feel about it?
I enjoyed it. And I like, because I like that sort of time period, the Captain America, World War II, post-World War II stuff, it's obvious to me that, they sort of have an idea of stories that they want to tell from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, because, Ant-Man is coming in July, and there's going to be a lot of 60s flashbacky stuff in Ant-Man that I think is going to have to do with Howard Stark and possibly with Agent Carter. I thought it was a good show. I enjoyed the character of Jarvis, who, again, they sort of play with things and play with, time and, things that not exactly from the comic. He was the Avengers butler in the comic. He wasn't around in the 40s. But, because they've established Jarvis the way they have with Tony and Iron Man and everything. So now we see that, Jarvis, the computer assistant of Tony Stark, is based on his father's butler. And I liked the character. I thought he was a great sort of sidekick. I like Haley Atwell, who plays Peggy. I think she's a strong character. And I like the vibe of the time. I thought it was great. They had Zola, they had a, guest appearance.
That's right.
So, I actually probably, if I'm being honest, I think I liked it more than S.H.I.E.L.D.
Wow.
And I'm happy it's coming back. I mean, did you watch it?
I watched it. I wasn't really crazy about it, but again, because it has that Marvel stamp and because it's part of this new Marvel universe, I kept up with it because I wanted to know, okay, what are they trying to tell me here? To me, it's the weakest of the three. But just because something has to be the weakest of the three.
Sure.
I wouldn't mind keep watching it, but if it kind of went away, it'd be like, you know what? That's okay. I don't mind.
Right. It wouldn't be a tragedy.
I mean, it's different if you told me Daredevil was going away, I would be like freaking out.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I know they recently announced there was renewed. So I know it was on the bubble for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what, too? It's sort of, I have a feeling that they're going to keep up with the 8-episode stories, 8-episode seasons. So, they do it as like a mid-season replacement.
Yeah,
when
talk
S.H.I.E.L.D.
about a short
goes away.
season.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's not the best, but it's, almost everything they do is quality.
Right.
So their worst show is better than a lot of the really, is better than most of what's on television.
Well, you mentioned before that up until Daredevil, DC was the one that was really doing the best work on television. Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about those shows that kind of establish that fact?
Well, I think maybe we should start with Gotham because that one's separate from the, everything DC has been doing up until now has been sort of interconnected. Yes. The universe has been interconnected.
Right. Gotham is completely a separate animal.
Yeah. Gotham's its own animal. So, we could start talking about that. And I have to say that Gotham is my least favorite of the DC stuff. I do enjoy it. I think it's sort of, the quality is shaky. I think it's good and then it's bad and then it's good and then it's bad. There are certain things about the show I love. And there are a few things about the show that I hate. And I'm going to say the one thing I hated the most was Jada Pinkett. Really? I could not stand her character. She has nothing to do with the mythology of the comic. And I get that they needed someone to sort of establish the Penguin, but I felt that her performance is completely over the top, ridiculous. Let me put it to you this way. Any episode that she's in, any scene that she's in, kills it for me.
Wow.
It's that bad. And I'm really hoping that the character is done.
I kind of understand that. I see how she is not a core character, so they kind of take advantage of that to give you new material and let her be the person that gives the core characters, the reason or the blame for whatever happens. So it's she's kind of like the conduit for everybody.
Yeah.
She's able to make other things happen by using her for that. And she's a disposable character, and that she wasn't going to be there for a long time.
Right.
Because she's not, a core character.
Right. No, she's not from the comic. And, we've seen it before where they've had other shows like Smallville that might talk, or even shows like Arrow where they bring in characters who are not from the comic. And your immediate thought is, well, they can kill this one. Whereas, you're talking about other characters from the comic where you're like, no, they're never going to get rid of this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they're created specifically for the show, you believe that, they're expendable.
But I still love the Penguin, and I'm really starting to appreciate the Riddler.
Yeah, I love them both.
He's really developing into a cool, creepy character.
Yes, I love the Penguin, and I think you're right. I think the Riddler is really sort of coming into his own. I think a lot of the mythology that surrounds those two characters is very thin in the comic. So the show is able to sort of build around these characters in a way the comic never could.
Right, they take advantage of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially with the Penguin, it's amazing. I love Robin Lord Taylor, who plays Oswald, and I think he's sort of the breakout character of the show. And I think Riddler is a close second. But I mean, I love Sean McKenzie as Gordon, and I love Donal Logue as Bullock. I mean, he's great. I mean, Bullock, he was born to play Bullock. and again, when you read the comic and you see these characters come to life, as some of them for the first time, you're like, these guys are perfect. These guys were born to play these roles. And, I like I said, though, I just feel as though it's had a hard time finding its footing. The kid who plays Bruce, I don't know that there needs to be such an emphasis on Bruce at this point in the game. So like the whole Bruce and Selina.
Yeah, Mr. Fox we met.
Yeah, that was cool to see. I love Sean Pertwee, who plays Alfred. But yeah, I think there are elements of the show that are a little weak. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for dark and gritty. I'm fine with that. It's just I just think that the quality that it hasn't always been like a home run.
And these type of shows, not only the last few we talked about, other than Daredevil, and the couple of other ones we're going to talk about next, Flash and Arrow, are the type of shows that they do tip over into the supernatural, superpower, super something environment. They really have different styles in how they balance the real gritty with this is science fiction, fantasy we're dealing with. You know, they do it in a different way. They have different formulas for it. And that brings us to Flash and Arrow, and it's almost like I want to treat them together because those are so connected, those two shows. Why don't we talk a little bit about the Flash first?
Sure.
And we've talked about it in the past, and we've mentioned both these shows, how impressed we were with them. And I like to say that one of the most amazing aspects, and I think I quickly was messaging you about it a couple days ago, with The Flash that's really blowing me away, and it's bringing me back to a very long time ago of watching television, and that is playing with time travel. I love it when a show, in a very smart way and in a very patient way, takes its time to lay these little crumbs all along the way. It kind of brings me back to my Babylon 5 days of how they're crafting this whole arc having to do with time travel.
Yeah, I can't say enough about The Flash, and I can't say enough about how they have so delicately laid the groundwork for this show. And I guess, let's face it, they have to start these shows with an assumption that they're going to last for 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And that's what they hope. In the case of The Flash, they just went for broke, and they just said, this is how it's going to be. But what's great about The Flash is that it doesn't take years for a payoff.
This isn't lost.
This is not lost. And the beauty of it is, you'll get a payoff and then they'll set something else up. So you don't feel like this agony of, well, am I going to see such and such, or how is this going to play out? The whole, at the time that, we're talking about this, we're almost on top of the season finale of The Flash. And I was wondering when the show first started would they get to the whole murder of his mother? How long would the Reverse Flash thing be a mystery and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And all this stuff is coming to a head at the end of season 1. But because it's done with such quality, you don't get the sense that, what's it going to be like after season 1?
Yeah.
And the beauty of The Flash is he has the deepest, and I'm talking more than Batman, more than Spider-Man, he has the deepest rogues gallery of villains, and they can just mine characters from his villains for years. And obviously the Reverse Flash was the guy, the Lex Luthor, the Green Goblin, whatever you want to say. But you get the sense that he'll just always be there. He'll always be sort of the antagonist that is busting his chops. But also, too, and we don't have the time to totally go into this, but, there was more than one Reverse Flash. And, the minute that I saw Eddie Thawne, I was like, well, he's the Reverse Flash because I knew his name. But, he kind of sort of has a connection, and there is a really good possibility that someday he'll suit up as the Reverse Flash. There's more than one version of this character. So it doesn't always have to be Eobard or Wells, however you want to identify him. So you're talking about a comic that is so dense with stuff, and that was such a great, like you said, just to go back to the whole time travel thing, the Flash, the character, the comic was all about time travel. Everything about that character sort of hinges on time travel. So I don't see that ever going away as an element of the character. And they, right off the bat, in the first episode, showed you that newspaper headline and talked about the Crisis. Now, the Crisis is a huge storyline from the 80s that if this ever comes to pass in the show or all the shows or however, I'll just die because it was incredible. And just to sort of, foreshadow here a little, when I saw the trailer for Legends of Tomorrow, I could say to myself, well, this Crisis thing could really happen because they are just diving into the time travel pool. If you thought, the Flash was okay, time travel, blah, 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 Reverse Flash. But now they bring in Rip Hunter, who is like a time guy who travels through time and makes sure that things don't... it's funny that it's played by Arthur Darvill from Doctor Who, because it's sort of like that whole, we have to protect time. And that seems to be what the goal of this team will be. And I just, I saw the trailer 10 minutes ago and I'm just like, I'm like giddy. That really, if it wasn't for the success of The Flash, you would never have seen that show. Arrow is its own animal that, what's interesting about Arrow is even though they've brought in the sort of metahuman element to it, I think initially, from what I remember, the creators of the show were saying, no, there's not going to be anybody with powers. It's all going to be tech. And they were like, you know what, screw it. That's just not going to happen. Once they committed to doing The Flash, and I have to say that the way that they brought in powered beings into this whole universe with the
Starlab's explosion,
that thing, and then just creating in sort of an instant, creating all these characters with powers and making that possible was a stroke of genius.
It's a creative way of writing your way into that, because obviously sometimes if nobody mentioned it, where the hell were they? That kind of thing.
And if it was a world that, prior to this didn't have powered, characters, then you had to, you have to bring it in sort of a, it's hard to, this word is a realistic way.
And Arrow, like you said before, Arrow came first before The Flash, obviously, and Flash kind of spun off in a way from the same creative team, and it's in the same universe, in the same world, in the same city. Sometimes they visit each other. But Arrow always had a different flavor, especially in the first couple of seasons.
Yeah.
I started watching it a little later and caught up, as opposed to Flash that I grabbed it as I think I downloaded it somewhere and before it even premiere, and I was going nuts about, whoa, this show is really fun. And, it's the type of show, especially for me, that I can, not only do I watch it with my son, but I also watch it with my daughter. My daughter loves it too. So it does have it's a little lighter. It has the CW faint smell to it.
Oh, sure.
But then it goes completely nuts in a different direction. So it's not as schmaltzy, I would say, as some of the older Smallville type of shows. But
right.
Arrow from the beginning was a darker show, not as dark as Daredevil, but it was a darker show. It almost, to me, it also reminded me a little bit of Lost once again, because it had that dual storyline, the present and past. It kept going back and forth, and it still does. I don't think as effectively as it did in the earlier seasons, because the time on the island was a very mysterious thing, and now it's the time off the island where we kind of flash back to, which I guess it's the formula of the show. I guess for whatever reason, that's how the show will be. We will always be flashing back somewhere, I guess, unless they completely redesign the show.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, whenever they do that, I sort of check out. I'm like, I'm really not interested in this. I could go for whole episodes where they're just talking about, the present. Because the past stuff is invariably not nearly as interesting. Another point to make about Arrow is, there's always been this sort of idea that Green Arrow is DC ripping off itself, and, that he's sort of a B-list Batman. And what they're doing, and I don't totally agree with that, but I think has some validity in terms of this show. Because Batman has always been a hands-off sort of, not for TV and whatever. And even though you didn't read the comic, you obviously have to know this. Mm-hmm. They've taken elements from Batman and deposited it into Arrow. I mean, Ra's-al Ghul, forget it. That's all Batman. They've taken a huge chunk. Was there ever
a Ra's-al Ghul connection to Arrow as far as you know?
No, not at all. So they took a huge chunk of the Batman mythology and just deposited it into Arrow. And, it's fine. It works. But again, Oliver does bear certain similarities to Bruce Wayne. And, So I'm not pointing this out as a criticism. I'm just making an observation and saying, it's fine. It works. The Green Arrow, I made the point before about Flash and his rogues gallery. The Green Arrow has like no rogues gallery. He's got some villains, but, he kind of shared them with other characters, and there wasn't like a big Green Arrow nemesis. So, they're pulling elements, I guess, to give them one.
But even though, again, it is not the same quality show that it was when it was at first, I still enjoy it. I still like, again, even when they do the crossovers, those are fun. And because I assume of the success of both Arrow and now The Flash is what kind of led them now to create this third show that we briefly talked about a few minutes ago. What is this whole trailer we just watched about Legends?
Well, yeah, it's what I said before. It's not the Justice League, because they don't want to use that name,
and it's not Suicide Squad either.
No, they want to have a sort of a team concept, because that's always been an important element from comics, and they've established all these great characters in Flash and Arrow, and you have Adam, and you have Firestorm, and now you have the Canary back to life, who's obviously brought back to life by the Lazarus Pit. You're going to have Hawk Girl. Again, you're going to go deeper and deeper into the DC catalog. You have Rip Hunter sort of bringing them together. And the featurette or trailer that we just saw gives you a sense of what the whole point of the show is that they're bringing these characters, these heroes together to protect time. And I'm all for it.
And if it's about time, the Flash is going to somehow be involved.
I'm sure that the Flash and Arrow are going to, make their fair share of appearances.
Right.
And I think, there's no reason to believe that it's not going to be anything, that it's not going to have that same level of quality as Flash and Arrow. They really seem to just be building on strengths upon strength upon strength.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's coming mid-season in 2016, and I can't wait.
And this is, again, we're just talking about television here, folks. We're not even dipping into films, because this is just television, how crazy it's getting with all these comic book characters. And the last one I want to talk about is, once again, another trailer they dropped on us like a day or two ago, which is the trailer for Supergirl, which It's like we knew it was coming, and it's a little scary kind of venturing into that world because we've had so much super whatever happened so many times, especially on television. Obviously, Smallville being the last gigantic one. It lasted a very long time. And I'll tell you, I watched the trailer, and at first I'm thinking, oh man, this is kind of girly, corny. And then all of a sudden, I think about a third or maybe halfway through the trailer, I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually interesting. And the stuff that was happening, and I guess the origin story that they're going to pursue, the her coming out type of story, it started to really get me really interested. And I kept saying to myself, oh, wow, this is going to be a really cool show for my daughter and I to watch.
Yeah, I think that I'm excited for it. I think a lot of people are ready to jump all over it because it's a tween or maybe older than tween, whatever, but maybe sort of, maybe that'll be their core audience. But I don't care. I don't care. I mean, okay, more power to them. If they have a female character and they can build a show around a female character, and okay, she's going to have chick problems and maybe problems with guys and whatever, as long as she suits up and kicks some ass, then I'm all for it. Some of the other shows like the CW show, I mean, this is the same guys who are doing Flash and Arrow.
Yeah.
So it's just on another network. It's going to have have those elements of quality. And okay, so if the target audience is female as opposed to men, it doesn't mean I can't enjoy it. I didn't love the character of Supergirl, but I also didn't love the character of Superman in the comic. I didn't read it all my life. So I think it's a solid cast. I think the actress who they chose, she's very good. And they released like a 7-minute reel.
Yeah, that was pretty long.
So, and I think that gave a real sense of what the tone of the show will be and what the effects will be like. And I mean, it's like, to me, it's like a foregone conclusion. If people are just going to crack on it because it's just the main character is a girl and she's going to sort of, it's not, I don't think it's going to be like Ally McBeal or something. I don't think it's going to be like that level of,
even though she's in it.
Yeah, even though she's in it. But, it's what came to mind. But, I just think that if you're going to, this is not a show that you can crucify right off the bat. Why? Because you're a guy and you think that, girls
again, you gotta
shows
remember,
are stupid?
Even though this is genre, and stereotypically genre should be a more open-minded field for people to jump in and out of, people are still people, and people are still going to have a very different reaction when they see something different, whether it's a different sex or a different race or a different whatever. There's going to be a little bit of a flinch, and then all of a sudden, if you got a good material, that goes right out the window.
Right,
it goes right out the window.
Exactly. No, you make a very good point. And, I'm completely on board with everything you're saying, except when it comes to Peter Parker, and we'll have that conversation at another point. But I agree with you.
We don't want to dip into movies. We're still on television.
No,
so as far as television is concerned, it doesn't exist.
Right. So yeah, I mean, just to sum it all up, I mean,
this is a good horizon we have coming up.
It's a great time to be us. It's a great time. These shows are hitting their stride. These shows have hit the mainstream. And, everybody's saying, well, when is it going to peak? When is the bubble going to burst? I don't know. But, for the time being, I'm just going to enjoy the ride.
Exactly. Once again, I agree with Steve. I completely agree.
Well, you should. From 1,000 miles away, nothing changes.
Yeah, I can still agree from far away. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, I want to thank, obviously, Steve for joining me today on this great conversation, because it's like these shows are just like oozing out of everywhere. And
every orifice.
And you want to talk to somebody about them because, not everybody is into this sort of thing. And I want to thank you guys, obviously, for listening. And we will see you here next time at Geekfest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Faster than I've ever been, and I wonder if it's because lately something's chasing me.
Barry, no!
It's my past.
If Flash were my son, I'd tell him a few things. First off, I'd tell him it's a dangerous world, so be careful. Then I'd tell him he's a hero.
Dad, the man that put you in here, I'm getting closer than I've ever been.
Barry, we have talked about this.
I know, and I'm done talking. You're not going to pay for another man's crime. Show me the future. He's the man that killed my mother.
I know what you're thinking.
Do you?
We need your help.
Hi, I'm Ray.
I know Barry's the Flash. I'm the Black Canary.
I love you.
Good to see you, Barry.
You will all freeze or burn.
There is a tsunami heading for the city.
The fun's about to begin.
If you go below 600 miles per hour, it'll explode. Run, 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 run!
No help here.
This is mad freaky. I still think about you all the time, and I know you've been thinking about me too.
Alan!
Something's changed between you two. I am not okay with it.
If I didn't know any better, I think that you were hiding something from me.
What do Dr. Wells and the Reverse Flash have to do with each other?
They're the same person.
If this is who I think it is, anybody that knows about this is in a hell of a lot of danger.
I thought Central City was supposed to be the fun one.
I don't know anything anymore, especially who I can and can't trust.
The real end game is almost here.
Then face me now!
Don't make me do this!
I promise you, Barry Allen, you will die.
I agree with Carlos. I don't believe it. As long as she suits up and kicks some ass, then I'm all for it.